Hi, I'm Dr. Sylvia Peregrino, and this is Entre Nosotras, Latina Voices. Today I'm continuing our conversation with EPCC counselors, but also talking about counseling within the Latino community as part of Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Carmen Castillo-Attar. I'm a counselor at EPCC. I work out of the Center for Students with Disabilities office. I've been a counselor since 1990. I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor in the state of Texas.
Great.
Thank you. Oscar Velasquez. I'm the district-wide counselor coordinator, and I also coordinate the Northwest Counseling Department. And I've been in counseling for about 25 years now. I've been working in some local agencies and now at El Paso Community College.
In preparation for this show, I was looking at the American Psychological Association, and I saw that there's only 5,000 APA certified counselors in the U.S. that are Latino. Why do you think there's such a shortage of Latinos in counseling?
You mean psychologists?
Psychologists.
I think only 2% of the population have a PhD. So I think, if only 2% of the population overall in the United States have a PhD, then you can, deduct that that's why the small number of Latinos that have 5,000, which is I think is a pretty good number, but I mean it's in
for
comparison
the whole country.
Exactly. So their psychologists are a little bit different from therapists or counselors, in which their education, of course, they hold a doctorate degree in psychology or philosophy, and then also they have training, besides that for mental health. They usually have a license. They can do research, they can do testing, things that counselors or therapists cannot do.
And so tell us a little bit about the difference between LPCs and the different licensing requirements here in the state of Texas.
So for an LPC to be licensed, you have to have a counseling degree, a social work degree, a counseling degree. You have to do 3,000 hours after graduation and after passing the exam of clinical work supervised by an LPC supervisor. And then once you complete that, then you can get you can be fully licensed.
Do we take students that are working towards those hours, or they're not students anymore, right? Because they've already graduated.
Yes. So if you have a master's degree, in counseling or psychology, you can apply for before it used to be that you had to do 2,000 hours and then take the exam. But I mean, it's way too long for somebody to be remembering all the, theories and everything. So now the state of Texas has changed to where you take the exam before you do the 3,000 hours, and you can become an LPC associate, which means that you can practice under the license of a supervisor. And then it takes that long. If you go full time and doing your 3,000 hours, it's a year and a half of clinical work that you have to do.
For the audience that might not know, an LPC is a licensed professional counselor.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a master's degree or
master's
higher?
degree or higher. A psychologist can be an LPC in Texas if they take the exam and they accumulate those hours.
And when they're doing those hours, do they get paid?
Some people do, some people don't, depending. So, but you can get paid. Mm-hmm.
So I know I have a lot of students that want to go into counseling because they're good listeners, they're empathetic. What advice would you give somebody wanting to go into the counseling field, since both of you have been in the area for a long time?
Well, I think any student at this point can pursue whatever they choose to pursue, right? So I think starting at El Paso Community College is a great place to start, just because they can start with their core curriculum, their basics, and then move on to the university and either branch out into counseling or social work. As Ms. Attar was mentioning, we've got two areas that we have at El Paso Community College in the counseling department. We've got the counselor that has a master's in counseling or psychology, and we also have the the counselor that has the master's in social work. So they can actually pursue a counseling degree taking those two routes, whether it's the counseling or psychology degree or the social work route. And all of the licenses and everything apply also to the social work degree, because they can and provide counseling and therapy as well within LCSW and LMSW. It just depends on the state and where they're practicing and abiding by those laws as far as their licensing requirements. But absolutely, so we gear students on the direction that the student wants to go, whether it be the counseling route or the social work route or the psychology route and so forth.
And usually, like you said, you mentioned, it takes those attributes or those characteristics of the person, right? Somebody that is a good listener, somebody that has a lot of empathy, somebody that is very interested in behavior. So those are the students that usually go towards those social sciences or counseling degrees.
Here in El Paso, do we have a good number of Latino LPCs?
I think the population reflects what we are here, right? So the majority of us are Latino, Hispanic descent, or immigrants that are coming here and they establish themselves. So we todos generalmente somos hispanos, hablamos español, podemos dar consejería en español, en inglés. So yo pienso que reflejamos la comunidad que tenemos aquí, la población de la comunidad.
Just in case somebody that's watching doesn't know, you just said that we reflect the population here and you can do counseling services in English and Spanish.
Absolutely. And we have 2 strong university partnerships that house great counseling and social work programs, in which if a student wants to pursue a bachelor's, a master's degree, then they can certainly transfer to those major universities. Of course, we've got our own social work program within EPCC, but if they want to branch out and pursue that bachelor's and that master's, I think that's an avenue that they could pursue. Why is that important? Because as you all know, Latinos, Chicanos, Mexican Americans, however you want to call yourself and associate yourself with, we don't reach that level of doctorate degree that we want to pursue.
No, and I know, I feel very fortunate that I was able to find scholarships and good mentors that guided me, because I'm a first-generation college student myself. I grew up in housing projects with a single mother, so I think statistically I shouldn't be here, and so I've been very blessed in my life, as I'm sure you both also feel very fortunate to be able to be in a position to help our community.
And the culture, right? The culture really doesn't sometimes lend itself, because we've got these, myths and these stigmas that, no, why do you want to go and get a degree? You need to work, right? And no, why do you want to get a degree? You need to get married and have children. So those are kind of some of the challenges that we face as far as, when we do see students in our sessions, that we've got to open their horizons and say, yes, you can do it. Yes, you can get a PhD. Yes, you can be a medical student. Because sometimes, the struggle is not just here at EPCC, but it's actually outside, external, in their families, in their friends, that are kind of repressing them from pursuing what they want to pursue.
And I think you made an excellent point, Oscar, that yes, sometimes, our families are in survival mode, and so they don't see that long term, having a college education, you're less likely to be unemployed, you're going to make more money, and you'll be in a better position to help your family with a degree or with education.
Especially for the first generation students, I think, or people, I think that it is important. The value of education is not there, and I give a lot of credit to students that pursue their education when nobody in their family has had an education, because that means that they're really goal-oriented. And I think it's generational, right? If you have a degree, then you most likely your daughter or your son are going to have degrees. So when you don't have that base, you don't know that school is the avenue to have a better life, then it's hard to motivate yourself and go, especially when, like Oscar said, there's so many needs in the family that people's like, no, education, work, education, money, food on the table, shelter. So those are things that our students, especially in our community, I think face every day when they're coming to college.
Well, I'm grateful that they have somebody to talk to at the college that's gonna look like them and maybe reflect some of those challenges in their own families as well.
I think we all have those stories, right? I tell my students when they're complaining or they're like, Miss, I don't have transportation. It's like, mijo, I went to school, I took the bus. It was raining, snowing, I took the bus. I never had a car until, I started working. So, when you reflect on that and when you show them that you did it, they also, feel like, oh, okay, it's somebody like me was able to overcome some of the obstacles that they had. So let me continue and going forward.
Absolutely, and it might be also a pattern, right? A pattern of the culture, generation after generation and after generation, right? The value of what Carmen is saying is the education, right? Valuing the education portion. If they can't see the value of education, they're not going to be able to move forward, right? And that's what I tell my students, move forward with what you can right now, right? Start at EPCC. Eventually, you'll end up at the university, and then pursue a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD. Do what you can with what you have right now, right? But if they don't see the value of education, they're not going to move forward. It's kind of like that Maslow hierarchy of needs. You're at the very bottom with that basic need. If you don't fulfill that basic need, you're not going to move to the next step, right?
I think we're also not saying that we don't, because I know my grandmother probably went to 3rd grade, but she was still a very wise woman and very strong woman, and gave me good consejos, gave me good advice. So we're not devaluing those things, but saying that there's options, and I think often, maybe, like you mentioned, if they don't see an example or somebody encouraging them to go into a field that maybe nobody in their family has gone into, then they might not want to do it.
And it's harder, but not impossible. And I think that they have to find the right mentors. You mentioned mentors in your past and your life history. I think that I think that being mentors to students, push them forward and saying, yes, you can. I know it's hard, but eventually you will see the light, and you probably, 2 years from now, you're going to be graduating and you're going to be going forward. So I think having these people telling them that also helps the students, progress.
And the Latino community, it's so rich in culture, right? So rich in family traditions, right? So rich in all aspects of, of the family, that a lot of times, going back to counseling, right, they take advice from their own members, right? So, talk about, them focusing so much on the family that they'll listen to their family members. Now I think today's generation is listening more to their peers, right? But the richness of the culture in the Hispanic Latino community is so ingrained in the family that a lot of times they really listen to the family, which is great, because the education should come from the family, right? And then we can provide that other education, which is in school.
And I know that, maybe we're kind of Generation X, like we're in a similar age group, but historically sometimes, so my roommate in college, her parents never taught her Spanish because they went to Bowie High School in the 1970s, where they still hit them with rulers for speaking Spanish. And so they never taught their kids Spanish because they didn't want them to be discriminated. So I think now the state is pushing, higher education for everybody, where historically that wasn't always the case. I don't know if you have stories like that in your family or people that encouraged you.
And I think that now multiculturalism is important, right? Knowing about other cultures, knowing about other languages, I think that enriches our culture and enriches us personally. And I think that that's very important. And I think now, because of this global social media, people are seeing, and students, even though, sometimes my generation is like, oh, social media is not really good, but I think that also has a positive aspect to it, right? So you know more, you can see more of the world and what is needed. So I think a lot of younger generations also see the value of learning both languages, learning 3 languages, as many as they can, in order for them to be good members of the society and understand each other. I think that's the one of the main points.
Were you going to add something?
No, I was just going to add that absolutely. I think one of the things, and ironically, I just saw a real short documentary on MSNBC on culture and language, right? So do you feel less Hispanic or Latino because you don't know Spanish? That was the whole topic, right? And no, I mean, if you have rich traditional values, if you practice those morals, values, you are what you are, right?
And I think it's hard to maybe my nieces will be watching, nieces and nephews, and so I would joke around that I wanted to give them a dictionary in Christmas because their grandmother used to watch them, and their grandmother only spoke Spanish, but they only spoke English. So I'm like, fuego, abuelita, fuego, like fire, grandma, like how, and I think that's sad that they are not able, because I was very close to my grandmother, but I think if you can't speak the language, you might not be able to have those conversations. But they've made efforts to improve their Spanish.
And absolutely, and it actually should be a two-way, right, process. So it's funny because one of my sons, same situation, right? My father doesn't speak any English, but he told my father, why don't you learn English, Grandpa, right? So, I mean, it's kind of like a two-way process. But yes, it is a little saddening that, they can't communicate with our elders. And, a lot of time, the language barrier is there, right? Even in counseling, right? A lot of our community and our culture don't want to attend counseling sessions because of that stigma of language, right? Are they going to be able to talk to me in Spanish? Are they going to be able to understand my issues in Spanish, right? Good thing is that we live in a border community. We've got all sorts of counselors, Hispanos, that can speak Spanish and English and other languages as well.
And I know that when I went to counseling after my mom passed, and it was important for me to find a Spanish-speaking counselor. Even though I speak English, I figured that they'd be knowledgeable about our culture and the expectations as a Latina. So I think what you mentioned is very important to have somebody that's culturally competent.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did a workshop for a local organization on cultural competency. And along with that, so cultural competency is the ability to understand, different cultures, being able to communicate with them and to understand their experience. But also cultural humility is another portion of it, and which is that sometimes you still even have to be aware that it's impossible to really put yourself in the experience of others, and that you can help them regardless, as long as you understand and you say, you teach me about your culture, you teach me about how was that experience for you, instead of us coming as counselors saying, oh, I know what you're going through, your mom passed away and I know what I'm going to do, instead of asking the other person, tell me how your experience was, because everybody has a different experience.
And I had never heard about that concept of cultural humility.
Yeah, it's a term that goes with cultural competency, because it is you want to understand. As a counselor, you have to go to workshops to understand how to be competent in that area in order for you to see clients of other races and ethnicities, right? But also that component of you need to understand also that you will never get to that point. You will never understand 100% African Americans, Native Americans, or anything of that sort, but you can still help them.
And that stigma is still around our community, our Latino community, right? Because you hear our traditional values and our culture about, those stories about your grandma saying, I'm going to go to counseling, and she tells you, no, for what? People can gossip about that. You, whatever problems you have, you tell the family, not somebody else, not that stranger, right? Or the fact that, the language barrier again, right? Why are you going to go do that? They're not going to understand me if it's an elder that's needing services. Or even, understanding the perspective of, no, where are you going? ¿Pa qué? No, yo no estoy loco. I'm not crazy, right? So understanding that and becoming cultural competent is that first step to being able to assist that individual or that family.
And I think you're right that there's still a stigma, and I think for as women, I think we're socialized to talk about our feelings, but I think for Latino men, be tough, don't cry, no llore, mijo, and so those I think are not positive messages that we send our boys sometimes. So I think that maybe sometimes people engage in other behaviors, as a way to self-medicate. So maybe, they'll drink a beer or drink a lot instead of talking about what's really bothering them.
And there's a whole, set of behaviors that you can do to numb yourself or soothe yourself, like, sex addictions, food addictions, all these things that kind of fill the void that you have, but because you can express those feelings. Although I think that things are changing right now, we have great role models now, male role models. I think that the new generation are growing up to say, mijo, you can cry, you can tell me how you feel, you can be sad, you can, express those feelings. I think it's slowly changing in our culture, but I think it is. So I've seen it, and I'm so proud of our new, fathers that are raising boys to be open about their feelings.
And it just takes one family at a time.
Absolutely.
And I think even here with our veteran community, they're also a community that's trained to be tough, but then they might come back with a lot of PTSD because of what they saw in the service.
So the good thing, and we want to announce it, Carmen and I, is that we are in the front, the opening almost this social service mental health center at El Paso Community College. I mean, we're so excited because we're almost about to open this center that's going to service students and the community with their issues that they might be going through. So we're very excited that that's going to be opening soon. And why do I say this? Because it's very important that we understand that, because at the community college level, all of the counseling and academia and counseling and therapy is done in one centralized area, as opposed to the universities. The universities have their own separate counseling units from the advising portion of the university. Here, we're on the brink of opening that separate center for students.
And so, can you tell us a little bit more, or it's still we're waiting for the grand opening?
No, we're still trying to figure it out how it's gonna work.
Okay.
Because we want an office in every campus. So, but for now, for sure, it's gonna be Valle Verde and maybe another campus, right? That we wanna open an office. We're securing, all the, the strategic procedures that had to be in place. We had to hire the clinicians also. So we are in that process right now. So we're not ready to say, okay, it's going to be open in by the spring semester. So there's things that are still pending, but I mean, it's very exciting because this is the first time that we're going to have an area just for mental health and social services. Social services like resources to the community. Somebody's don't have home, don't have resources, money to pay for electricity, all of these things that are coming up right now with inflation, things, we are suffering because of that. So a lot of people, a lot of students, we have the Tejano pantry right now, and that is a resource, for students. So this center that we want to open is going to be it's going to have clinicians and also social workers that can help with all these issues that our students, that we knew for a long time that those issues are part of the students' lives. Oscar mentioned in the previous segment that we see the student as a holistic person, right? And that we as counselors not just take care of the educational part of it, the advising, but we have to see that the students are a whole. It's a whole, it's a person. It's not just the going to college and education and learning, but also, what are they, how they're at home, what are they suffering, what they need at home, what are their needs, transportation, mental health, and all that. So it is holistic for sure.
So it's going to be like a one-stop shop where they can find resources for whatever is ailing them.
And I'm sure that at the beginning we're going to be like trial and error, right? But the idea is there, and then eventually we'll progress as needed for the betterment of the students.
Absolutely, and just really quickly, we want to add the student component as well. So we want to have interns from the universities there that are getting their LPC, their bachelor's or their master's in those areas to do their internships there. So really neat.
And hopefully we can find some grant money so that we can pay our interns because gas prices keep going up, and so I think it works better when we can help them with those financial resources. So I know we're going to be on the lookout when that center arrives, and I'm looking forward to going to that ribbon cutting ceremony. And thank you for giving us a little preview of what's coming up, and the fact that we are going to have what's the center going to be called?
Actually, we don't have a name for the center, so that's why I'm calling it the Social Service / Mental Health Center at this point.
And it'll be open to everybody, not just community college students. So that's wonderful. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and thank you for letting us know about this new valuable resource in our community.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us.
Invite.
I'm Dr. Sylvia Peregrino. My guests have been Mr. Oscar Velasquez, District-wide Coordinator for Counseling here at EPCC, and Ms. Carmen Castillo-Attar, who is a CSD counselor. Be sure to join us on EPCC TV on YouTube, where you can find some of our previous episodes, and join us next time where we're going to have more exciting guests to feature in our show, Entre Nosotras, Latina Voices. Thank you.